Good evening. Wish you and all your loved ones a very happy Ganesh Chaturthi. The additional 25% US tariffs on Indian exports, sanctions or penalty for purchasing Russian oil, they've kicked in. The government has adopted a multi-pronged strategy to mitigate the impact. India has made one thing very clear. Bharat will not buckle under pressure. So stakeholder consultations, diversification of exports, remaining engaged with the United States of America for a trade deal that is non-discriminatory are some of the steps that India is taking both in the short and the medium term, and that is our top focus story on this broadcast.
Trump's 50% tariff kicks in. Modi's भारत झुकेगा नहीं मैसेज.
दबाव कितना ही क्यों ना आए, हम झेलने की अपनी ताकत बढ़ाते जाएंगे.
India explores newer markets. Can FTA deal still be inked?
Very hopeful that we will find a way to conclude a satisfactory, mutually beneficial free trade agreement with the United States.
The Trump tariff tremor impact. That is a big focus on India first.
The Commerce Ministry is holding a meeting with exporters of key sectors from gems and jewellery to chemicals to leather, textiles to work on shipment diversification. India is working out a dedicated outreach program to 40 countries. Now, there are more than 200 countries that India exports to, but working on 40 countries specifically that include the United Kingdom, Japan, South Korea to push textile exports. I caught up with Yog Guru Baba Ramdev, who's made an emphatic push for Swadeshi. He's echoing Prime Minister Narendra Modi's vocal for local clarion call. Now, this is a time for every Indian to put their shoulder to the wheel, for India to be able to stand tall on the world stage and not buckle under US bullying tactics. That's very clear. I'm Gaurav Sawant. We get you all details, but first, as always, the headlines on India first. "34 dead in the Mata Vaishno Devi landslide after a cloudburst in Jammu. More than 3,000 people have been displaced by floods. Prime Minister Narendra Modi assures the state of centre's assistance in a conversation with Chief Minister Omar Abdullah as rescue operations intensify. Cabinet gives a green signal to submit a bid for Commonwealth Games 2030. Pre-nod for aid for Gujarat government if India wins the bid. MK Stalin joins Rahul Gandhi in the Bihar rally, speaks in Tamil. BJP attack says Stalin spoke ill of Biharis. Bihar Deputy Chief Minister takes the intruder jibe. Brutal assault by the TVK chief. Vijay's bouncer lands him in trouble. Vijay booked after complaint by Carter, who was thrown off stage at the Madurai rally. Thackeray cousins unite on Ganesh Chaturthi, Dhol's Aarti, and a possible alliance between the Thackeray cousins on the cards. Rajya Sabha member and former Foreign Secretary and former Ambassador to the United States, Harshvardhan Shringla, said, hopefully, India will find a way to conclude a satisfactory and mutually beneficial bilateral trade agreement with the United States of America sooner than later. But hope is not India's strategy. New Delhi has actually reached out to countries like the United Kingdom, Japan, South Korea, Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Russia, Australia, and the Gulf countries in a bid to boost exports to these countries. So India exports to over 200 countries, but these 40 countries hold the key to diversification. If you talk about the textile sector, They represent more than $590 billion in textile and apparel. But that's not the only sector that the government is focusing on. From gems and jewellery to leather to textile, there's a lot that the government has on its table to mitigate the impact of the additional US tariffs or penalty for buying Russian oil. Our top story gets you more on India's wider strategy to mitigate the threat.
The hammer has dropped. 50% tariffs on Indian goods is officially live. But New Delhi has made one thing very clear. India will not bow to economic pressure.
मेरी सरकार लघु उद्यमियों का, किसानों का, पशुपालकों का कभी भी अहित नहीं होने देंगी। दबाव कितना ही क्यों न आए, हम झेलने की अपनी ताकत बढ़ाते जाएंगे।
On the eve of tariff, Prime Minister launched EV battery production in Gujarat with exports planned to 100 countries. He said India's strength is democracy and demography.
साथियों, भारत के पास डेमोक्रेसी की शक्ति है और भारत के पास डेमोग्राफी का एडवांटेज है। हमारे पास स्किल्ड वर्कफोर्स का बहुत बड़ा पूल है, इसलिए कि हमारे हर पार्टनर के लिए विन विन सिचुएशन बनाता है।
President Trump is failing to deter India. Despite his threats, India did not stop buying Russian oil, nor did it open its agricultural sector to US. In this anger, he calls Prime Minister Modi a terrific man in one tone, while claiming he stopped war on other.
I'm talking to a very terrific man, Modi of India. And I say, what's going on with you in Pakistan? Then I'm talking to Pakistan on trade. I said, what's going on with you in India? And the hatred was tremendous. Now, this has been going on for a hell of a long time, like sometimes with different names for hundreds of years. But I said, what's going on? I said, I don't want to make a trade deal. No, we want to make trade deal. I said, no, I don't want to make a trade deal with you.
India is launching textile export outreach in 40 countries, including the UK, Japan and Germany, to counter the impact of the 50% US tariff. The outreach will be led by industries and embassies and positioning India as a reliable supplier of quality, sustainable products. The PMO has already held meetings to shield farmers, MSMEs and exporters. With tariff hitting textiles, seafood, leather, Indian exporters are under pressure. An Indian-made shirt that costs $10 now sells at $16.40 in the US, far more than competitors from Vietnam, Bangladesh or China. And in the middle of this trade tension, the real muscle of India-US relations is on display, a $10 billion defense deal.
Very hopeful that we will find a way to conclude a satisfactory, mutually beneficial free trade agreement with the United States early rather than late. And that would certainly take us to the next step of the visit of President Trump to India, a meeting with the Quad leaders, and I think really setting us back on track.
Meanwhile, Modi prepares for back-to-back visits to Japan and then China for the SCO summit. Trump may raise tariffs and make noise, but India is building jet engines, opening new markets, defending its farmers and holding ground. Bureau Report, India Today.
Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh Sar Sanchaalak Mohan Bhagwat has echoed Prime Minister Narendra Modi's big Swadeshi push. He stressed that international trade is important. It must continue, but without pressure. He's made that Swadeshi push, asking every Indian to consume what's made in India. And look at that very simple example that Mohan Bhagwat gave. He said, why foreign soft drinks? We make shikanji at home, Nibu Pani, drink Nibu Pani and not the foreign cold drinks. But listen in to Mohan Bhagwat on the impact and the importance of why India must stand tall right now and not buckle under global pressure.
निर्भरता सब बातों की कुंजी है, विकास भी करना है तो हर बात में अपना देश आत्मनिर्भर होना चाहिए, अपने घर से शुरू करना। जब ये स्वदेशी की बात करते हैं तो लगता है कि विदेशों से संबंध नहीं रहेंगे, व्यापार, ऐसा नहीं है। आत्मनिर्भर होना यानी बाकी लोगों को बंद करना नहीं है, आत्मनिर्भर होना है, लेकिन दुनिया परस्पर निर्भरता पर चलती है, कुटुंब भी परस्पर निर्भरता पर चलता है और इसलिए अंतर्राष्ट्रीय व्यापार तो चलेगा और उसमें लेन देन होगी, बस इसमें दबाव नहीं होना चाहिए, स्वेच्छा होनी चाहिए।
Dabav nahi, swechha. You know, any trade between two countries has to be mutually beneficial. One can't be pressured the way Donald Trump is attempting to pressure multiple countries, and multiple countries have buckled under his pressure, not India. So from Prime Minister Narendra Modi's big vocal for local push to Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh Sar Sanchaalak Mohan Bhagwat, can we have Nimbu Pani, why a cold drink? To Yog Guru Baba Ramdev, making that Swadeshi push. He spoke to me just a short while back. The question remains, will the US President Donald Trump see the resolve of 1.4 billion Indians and back off? Or is there a threat that he may raise tariffs even further? Though we are inking a $1 billion fighter jet engine deal, the GE 404 fighter jet engines will US supply, and given that dodgy track record and its adverse impact on the light combat aircraft for an induction in Indian Air Force for decades, will that actually impact us adversely? And will the US presidency sense and stop alienating India using this bogus excuse of Russian oil? Joining me on India First is S.C. Garg, former Finance and Economic Affairs Secretary of India and author. Ambassador Veena Sikri, former top diplomat, has been a High Commissioner to Bangladesh. Shankar Iyer is one of India's best respected political economy analysts and author. Seema Sirohi, author, friends with benefits and a columnist, joins us from the United States of America. In a moment from now, we will be joined by Raymond Vickery Jr., former US Assistant Secretary for Commerce and Trade Development, and Arun Kumar Sharma. Dr. Sharma is Senior Associate Chair on India and Emerging South Asia Economics. But I want to begin by asking Mr. Garg, sir, estimates suggest India could lose up to 2.17 lakh crore rupees across 10 sectors, and lakhs of jobs are at risk. What is your assessment of the immediate short-term and medium-term impact, worst hit sectors, and of course steps that are being taken to mitigate the impact?
I think that is being done now by a lot of people and organizations. Very broadly, if you want to take it, it's about 55% to 57% of India's exports to America getting hit by that 50% plus tariff. At that level of tariff, the trade is dead in those respects. You just can't export to them. And of about $85 billion of exports last year, if you take that, that's about 3.5 lakh crores to 4 lakh crores of exports to America are in a very serious risk. You can't export to them. And therefore, there is bound to be very high impact on many sectors, textiles, gems and jewelry, carpets, and many of those things have been mentioned. These are not unknown commodities now. Factories are closing, labor is being sort of laid off, and the pain is going to be there. How do you manage it? See, you can't dig a well when the house is on fire. This so-called attempt now to go to 40 countries and trying to find a solution is a situation responding like this, that you're trying to dig a well. I have been saying right from the month of April, when first time it was proposed, and there was a lot of expectation that India would be one of the early ones to
Yes.
have a deal. The basics of India-US trade were stacked so much against a deal because we were not prepared to grant concessions on agriculture and other kind of things, and Trump wouldn't have done a deal without them, and therefore a deal with US at that time was also an impossibility.
Okay.
It has proven to be true now, and going forward also, whether Shringla says whatever he says, it's absolutely unlikely until Trump remains with the kind of ask which he has.
So let me also bring in Shankar Iyer on this. Shankar Iyer, is that also your assessment that are we digging a well when the house is on fire? Will the pain be short term, or should we brace for tremors through the Trump tenure for the next 4 years?
Well, let me use another analogy, which is, everybody, particularly a lot of people in government, are saying this is like a reality check, an alarm for India to do the things that needed to be done. The fact is that every time there is a crisis and you do something and then you press the snooze button on the alarm and nothing really progresses. So yes, there is a lot of opportunity here. This crisis should not be allowed to be wasted. There is diversification, opportunity for diversification. But the primary issue, Gaurav,
Yeah.
is why is India's manufacturing at 12 or 13% of GDP, and why is it growing? I mean, those are the questions that should be answered, and there is no dearth of literature on what needs to be done. The problem is between the state governments and the bureaucracy, nothing moves. So you still are faced with, versions of Jan Vishwas bill, versions of labor code, versions of urbanization, all those issues. So my suggestion simply is this, that Mr. Trump is used to pyrotechnics. I mean, his economics is bordering on Hafta economics. I mean, which other US president is extracting money from his own companies for selling chips abroad?
Yeah.
Or which other president is sort of extracting equity for investment into Intel or
True.
whatever? So we have to expect this. There might be further bad news down the road. The committee, which is examining import of pharmaceutical products and electronics, might still be there. The hypocrisy of this needs to be exposed a little better. So Trump doesn't speak. The reason for the tariffs on India is we import oil from Russia. US imports uranium from Russia.
Yes.
The EU will continue importing gas and oil from Russia till 2027. And Mr. Mark Rutte, who is the NATO chief, who had this righteous tone about India importing Russian gas, should know that much of the uranium trade and gas trade is laundromated in Netherlands. So, I mean, there is enough literature on that. So the question is that India has to first be patient, not get extreme. The all these suggestions of ideas can be explored.
Okay.
We can go to 40 countries or 45 countries, but cost, the person who's buying your shirt has to have a cost advantage, so which is what we have to develop. And these sectors will be affected, Gaurav. They need help, for which India should raise resources. The government should find resources.
Fair enough. Raymond Vickery Jr., how should we read Trump's imposition of 50% tariff? Is it purely transactional, a US pressure to extract a better deal from India, or does it have deeper geopolitical undertones that are linked to whether it's China or Russia and India's positioning, whether it's BRICS or RIC?
Well, thanks very much for having me. It's perfectly apparent that the two largest and greatest democracies in the world need to cooperate and move forward to build peace and prosperity in the world. That having been said, President Trump's view is not that of cooperation, that it is of the real estate developer who wants to make a deal on a particular transaction. The relationship is not important. Empathy in terms of what the other partner or the other negotiator's position is are not important. All that is important to this president, unfortunately, is himself and his own ego and his own position as the great man who makes the deal and decides it. There is a question about, of course, why China is being treated disparately from our good friends in India. And the reason is, of course, is that Trump's view is that these are the two great deciders that can get together in a room and make a deal, and he'll come out on top. So this is a very difficult time. It's going to have a very harmful effect in the United States. But I have every confidence that with midterm elections, with the courts, that like any other democracy, we're going to work our way through this difficult time as we worked our way through sanctions in regard to nuclear tests and other matters. But it's no question that in 24 hours, Donald Trump has done more damage than the good we've been able to create in 30 years.
That's a very interesting point that you make. And Seema Sirohi, do you agree? And Ambassador Sikri, to you immediately after that. Seema Sirohi, do you agree Donald Trump has done more damage in this recent past or the past 24 hours than it took for India and America to put this relationship together for 25 years? And does US think India will blink under pressure, or Trump administration just doesn't care? What is your appreciation? What's happening in the States?
See, Gaurav, it's very true. It's very obvious that what took 25 years to build has been damaged. I wouldn't say irreparably, but in what form the relationship survives is the question. It'll take years to rebuild trust, no question about it. The disruption is huge. The rhetoric has been too sharp for any democratically elected leader to sort of ignore. So it's had an impact in India. And what it does going forward, the big questions to me are, what is Trump's strategy for the Indo-Pacific? Is there an Indo-Pacific at all? Or is it about finding some accommodation with China, with Russia? So it's all about the G3. Not about building partnerships so that you can counter your biggest rival, that is China. So you're trying to find accommodation. That scenario, when you think through it, is extremely problematic for India, because it kind of leaves India out, hanging out to dry. So I'm hopeful that the rest of the relationship that seems to be working in a manner of speaking, I call that trying to keep the lights on. For example, the lower level officials met each other, tried to do the 2+2 dialogue. I don't know if anything will happen, whether the Quad summit will happen, but I'm told that contacts about the defense relationships are on. And so the bureaucracy in both countries is trying to portray that don't panic, the sort of ribs and bones of the relationship will survive. But I think at the political level, it's a huge storm. And 1998 sanctions I wouldn't compare this to that, because at that time there was a system.
Yes.
And here there is one person who's deciding everything.
So let me bring in Ambassador Sikri for more on this. Ambassador Sikri, on the one hand, Donald Trump imposes this additional 25% sanctions on India or tariffs on India. On the other hand, you have this high-tech cooperation underway, the 2+2, as in, for the benefit of our viewers, India's officials from the Defense Ministry and the External Affairs Ministry and the US officials of the State Department, they are meeting. A defense exercise just got underway, and then you have a $1 billion GE404 jet engine deal. So are we moving on two prongs of the bilateral strategic partnership and high-tech partnership? That's going on, but trade is hobbling along. Is that even possible in the long run?
Well, I think overall you have to characterize India's response as one of strategic restraint. So we've been very cautious and correct. We've called out the tariffs, definitely called them unfair, unreasonable, and unjustified. But we've said very clearly, we've maintained a very cautious, low-key approach. And Prime Minister Modi has not raised any, not raised his voice. He's not made any counter allegations. But so we've trying to keep the relationship on an even keel, and that's why all the scheduled meetings at various other levels are going on. But there is no doubt that we have to analyze what is happening in two different categories. One is the 25% additional tariffs for the Russian purchase of Russian oil. I think for this, we have to strongly call out the hypocrisy of the United States when they are themselves buying oil from, buying uranium and other products from Russia, when China is buying a larger amount from Russia, and when, Turkey and Japan and others are also buying. Just picking up on India, this is absolutely uncalled for. And for this, there is absolutely no restraint. I think on the other 25%, which is coming on the trade items, I think, yes, there will be an impact on certain sectors where the exports to America account for 30 to 40% of India's total exports in that sector, whether it is gems and jewelry, whether it is leather and footwear, textile and apparels, shrimp and seafood and so on. So in these sectors, I think the government of India is taking a view of going in for, increasing domestic consumption. For example, the reduction in the GST is very timely. It's come at a time when there will be more capacity available, more for domestic consumption, more for purchase, within India to keep the Indian economic growth growing. And I think this is a very good possibility. I think we should also call in the fact that while you call this 25% trade, just the trade-related items unbalanced, we have to bring in the areas in which America benefits a lot, for digital services and so on. And I think finally, I would like to say that I agree with the factor that at this moment for Trump, the most important thing for him is to do the trade deal with China. And that's why China has been given another 90-day pass. They are attempting to control a deal. This may be going back to a G2 situation. Yes, with Russia, they had a very good summit in Alaska, but subsequently, because the progress in the peace deal with Ukraine is not at all to the satisfaction of President Trump, he's been attacking President Putin as well.
In fact, there have been attacks even today, both on Russia and on Ukraine, on Rostov-upon-Don. There's been a big attack in Russia and in Ukraine in the past 24 hours, ma'am. But let me also bring in Dr. Sharma into this conversation. Dr. Sharma, what is your assessment of the Swadeshi push in India, the diversification of exports? Does all of this signal a total lack of trust in the US as a strategic partner in the road ahead? And does transactional Trump not understand what's at stake, or he doesn't care? It's like he wants this deal, he doesn't care about the overall relationship. As far as India is concerned, we look at relationships very differently.
Yeah. So there are two very separate questions. I'll answer the second one first. I think the challenge with President Trump is it's very difficult to get into his head. And he's a very unscripted leader who comes up with, and I'm not sure exactly what is the component of his advisory team and how much advice he takes. But the fact is that he has mixed politics and trade in this decision. So the 25% penalties is almost like a sanction, saying if you buy Russian oil, I'm going to import. And that was
They've used words to that effect.
Yes. And then on top of that, he did that, prior to the Alaska summit. But at the end of the summit, the relevance of the 25% is already gone. But he's now using it. He's not taken off that 25%, although the relevance of that 25% is gone in the light of what happened in Alaska. So now, essentially, he's made that one statement, using it now, that political kind of ploy, as a commercial ploy in putting pressure on India on that deal, so to speak. And he also knows, and a lot of advisors know, that India is not going to budge so easily. So they're saying, look, I have that leverage on you and I don't have it on China. That's very important to note because China has a lot more leverage on the United States than India does, in terms of critical minerals and the fact that the voter base is so much dependent upon Chinese manufactured goods,
And
low
especially
price
with
goods.
Christmas coming in a couple of months.
Yeah, exactly. So a Dollar Tree or a Five Below or whatever, if prices go up, that's an issue, political issue in the United States. So I think nobody should be surprised at the fact that there is a differentiated approach to India and China. I think
So,
it's a wake up call for us to realize that yes, we did great progress in our relationship, we boosted trade, but the reality is that we are not in the top pecking order in US priorities compared to some of the other partners they have. That's one. And the second thing is that I think this is a good reminder for us on where we stand in the world and what we need to do to really build a robust economy, particularly addressing the vulnerabilities of our SME sector, our other industrial sectors, where essentially we are living really at the edge.
no, so
We
as
wherever
Shankar
we
Iyer
have
and Mr. Garg also pointed out, we should look internally right now and not push for a deal. A bad deal is a bad idea. Let's not have a deal, then have a bad deal. Is that also that's been your assessment, Mr. Garg, throughout? But the impact of 50% tariff on gems, jewelry, textile, leather, pharmaceuticals, all of that is big. But oil exports or electronics or pharmaceuticals, that's been exempted from the additional tariffs. So is Trump seeing how India will react, and are you likely to see, in your appreciation, that there will be a quiet diplomacy to find a deal, or it's now been put on the back burner in the cold storage? He'll focus on China, the G2 is the assessment, and India should just then not look in this direction for a trade deal now.
See, however, we may hate Donald Trump, but there is a method in his madness. And that's what we need to understand in case we want to do business with him. You have rightly pointed out that at this moment, pharmaceuticals, computers, and some of these products are not into the higher tariff regime. But this may be a temporary sort of relief. He has threatened that in case you do something with the digital trade taxation, we had abolished it, so we may not be affected. But if we do something, it's not at all unimaginable that he may even attack the pharmaceuticals, the computers, the services, the remittances. So our stakes with America is much larger than what is right now sort of seen in the mercantile trade. I think we should learn how to size him up and do business with him, do a deal which satisfies. See how he has been able to get all the four things which he wanted to set out from Japan, Indonesia, and others. He wanted zero tariff access to all American products. He wanted to impose 15 to 25% tariff on others export.
No, but we can't give him access to our agriculture sector even if he wants it.
No,
I mean, why wouldn't that be cutting our nose to spite our face? I mean, just to keep him happy.
I think, Gaurav, that is where we should do a lot more strategic thinking. Do we really have agriculture interests to protect? Look at what the fishermen's, for that matter. What is our offensive interest? What is our defensive interest there? We have exports to make. Now, without the deal, those exports are lost. There is no American exports to us which we are trying to protect. Look at farmers for that example. If you allow access for the GM soybean oils, it's not the farmers' incomes are going to be affected. It is some consumers who may not like to consume the GM oil. So please let us not be sort of blown by this rhetoric that we are trying to protect farmers and the fishermen and the animal rearers, etc.
No, but there's another aspect, Shankar Iyer. Shankar Iyer, do you agree with Mr. Garg's assessment? Because some of the reservations that have been pointed out is the kind of food that they feed to their animals, the kind of fodder they want to send to India. Is that okay culturally to India, or is that a very small issue? Shankar Iyer, I have another bit of information coming in, but Shankar Iyer and Seema Sirohi, before I take that big story.
Okay, so what is the issue with the agri sector is the opening it to GM products, and GM products cause distortion both in the seeds market and in the output market. What is the issue with the dairy? The US dairy producers, they use different kinds of animal protein in their feed, and that is a culturally problematic issue. But let's step away 1 minute from this. Why is China escaping everything that he had promised, Trump had promised in the campaign? Because China has leverage. Why are we look at the products where the Trump has not yet imposed tariff? Those are our leverages. Anything that we make, which US cannot sort of substitute or supplant to another economy, is our strength. So we have to build our economy, build our economic strategy based on leverages, on how to hold them by their short hair.
Okay. And is that doable, Seema Sirohi and Ambassador Sikri? Quickly, a quick response before I bring in another big story that's coming in. Seema Sirohi and Ambassador Sikri. Seema Sirohi, go first.
That's for the economists to answer, because we've been at it for decades. So if India didn't make the right decisions back then, every crisis brings up this kind of analysis that we should do this, we should do that. We should have done it like 30 years ago, right? So the question is, how do we get out of the crisis now?
Yes.
If there is a way out, find a way to reach Trump. It's too easy to say that, oh, he cannot be reached, etc. No, he can be. Every other country has managed to do some deal or the other. So I would say there is, a way should be found for India to reach him and to figure out what exactly is irking him. It's not the oil, if it's not the agriculture sector, is it hurt to his ego? Well, find a way to where both sides can save face and move.
Yeah.
Okay. And is that doable, Ambassador Sikri? Give him credit that, okay, fine, he may have worked on Pakistan to get them to call us and seek a ceasefire, but there was no third-party mediation. Or he may get emboldened and then want to now come in for third-party mediation, which is also one of his game plans, Ambassador Sikri.
I think very clearly 2 points I'll make. First of all, I think India is not going to come under any pressure. I think the point you raised about the bovine, feed for the dairy products is very important. Our farmers are very important, and our micro mini and also the seafood, the fishermen are very important. So we are not going to come under pressure for those. We do know that the USTR itself thought that India and US had got a good deal, and he took it twice to President Trump, who turned it down. Okay, coming now to the red lines on the question of mediation and so on. Yes. We have stated very clearly that we have 3 red lines, and we are not going to give in on them. One is the interest of the agriculturists and the farmers. One is on our freedom to purchase oil from Russia or any other country that we feel is good for the Indian economy. And the third is no third-party mediation on India and Pakistan or any other issue. So I think we are not going to give in on these red lines. If you think that giving in will put India in a better position, it will not. It will completely weaken our position, and we will, open ourselves to further pressure down the line all the time. So I think the deleveraging of the American market is very important, whether we look for it in the Indian market, whether we look for other multilateral agreements like the Japan-led Trans-Pacific Partnership, or we look for more bilateral FTAs like with UK or with the EU. I think that there are only 7 or 8 sectors affected, and we can deleverage the influence of the American market, and of course look for more purchases within the Indian market as well. I think we are all set to do that, and and we have to try it out. For now, I don't see any interest or any reason for giving in to American pressure, which has completely been unfair and unreasonable. And we have to look at other options right now. Because
Dr. Sharma, give me a moment to come to you. I have breaking news that's coming in, and there's an important story that's just come in. The textile and fertilizer industry, it's poised to gain significantly from the upcoming GST 2.0 rationalization. So this fitment committee on GST has suggested a sharp rate cut across critical categories, and this is aimed at resolving the inverted duty structure and easing costs for the end users. So in the textile sector, for example, categories such as the woven fabric of cotton, man-made fiber, wool, apparel, hosiery, and certain blended textile. Now it's under consideration for a reduced 5% GST rate down from the existing higher bracket. So there's an effort, textile sector that gets impacted, some relief. On the fertilizer front, the council is weighing a weight cut again from 12 to 5%. I want to quickly cut across to my colleague Karishma Sudani, special correspondent, Business Today TV, who joins us with the latest on this. Karishma, break the thinking down. When does it come into effect? How does it benefit these sectors, and how quickly?
Gaurav, I think it's being a big decision that the council will take up on the 3rd and 4th September in New Delhi, and these kind of changes coming in at a time where we have been fighting the tariff looms, especially for the textile sector, will be domestic industries, and actually will make our exports cheaper when we are looking at diversification of markets, as now most of the products that were earlier taxed at 12% when it comes to textiles and fertilizers will now be taxed at 5%, also pulling up our lower input costs and pushing for cheaper exports. Besides this, I'm being told by my sources that a lot of common man-made, common household items will now be taxed at 5%, which were earlier taxed at 12 to 18%. Say something as simple as eating cheese or consuming ghee or butter or chocolates, confectionery items for which we were paying a higher price will now come to 5%. So we're looking at government's reinforcement towards pushing consumption, and in about a week's time all these proposals could actually get a green signal, because they've been finalized by the state ministers panel who recently met, and also of course summarized by the fitment committee, which is a panel of GST officials. And once the council, which is chaired by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, gives a green signal to it, this could actually be a game changer for the industries.
A game changer for the industry, the steps that are being taken internally, but in the long run. And Dr. Sharma, the last 30 seconds I have on this part of the show, as far as the India-US trade deal is concerned, we're told back channel both sides remain engaged, but is it better not to have a deal than have a bad deal, or a deal that is not mutually beneficial?
I don't think Indian negotiators will agree to a bad deal. I think that's a given. That's number one. But number two, I think there is a need for pragmatism. So I think yes, it's important to essentially say and remain firm on certain red lines. But I think what those red lines are need to be practically evaluated, in the sense we have to be very clear on what trade-offs are we making. I think we have to make trade-offs where they really matter, both domestically and globally. I think that's where the wise course of action will be. But we are all also aware that it's not only trade, it's also politics. It's domestic politics, it's global politics. And so I think all those factors will be coming into play as these negotiations proceed.
Okay, and we'll be tracking that story very closely. I want to thank all my guests. I also want our viewers to know, so this S&P Global Ratings Assessment, they've said that their assessment on high US tariffs is that it's unlikely to impact India in the long term, especially when it comes to our growth prospects. Exposure of India to the US in terms of exports is just about 1% of the GDP is their assessment. So short term, it may have marginal impact. Long term, India's growth story remains sound. I now want to cut across and listen in to Yog Guru Baba Ramdev. So Prime Minister Narendra Modi gave vocal for local call, big push for Swadeshi, Atmanirbhar Bharat. You know, when it comes to apparel, make sure you buy what's made in India. When it comes to leather goods, when it comes to gems and jewelry, whatever is being adversely impacted, make that extra effort now and in the upcoming festival season so that every Indian can stand tall in the days, weeks and years ahead. Listen in to Yog Guru Baba Ramdev. आज गणेश चतुर्थी है। कहते हैं भगवान गणेश हर विघ्न को हर लेते हैं और आज हमारे साथ योग गुरु बाबा रामदेव हैं। बाबा, अमेरिका के इन टैरिफ्स का जो विघ्न भारत के सामने है, कितनी बड़ी चुनौती भारत की?
अमेरिका एक गांव की भाषा में बोले तो गुंडागर्दी, तानाशाही और इस तरह से एक असंवेदनशील राष्ट्र की तरह बर्ताव कर रहा है, एक शत्रु देश की तरह बर्ताव कर रहा है। तो फिर भारत के लोगों को भी अब चुप नहीं बैठना होगा। सब लोगों को प्रतिबद्धता के साथ अमेरिका के बने हुए सारे प्रोडक्ट्स का बहिष्कार करना पड़ेगा, बायकॉट करना पड़ेगा। जिस दिन भारत के लोगों ने अमेरिका के सारे प्रोडक्ट्स का बायकॉट करना शुरू कर दिया, अमेरिकन कंपनियों का बायकॉट करना शुरू कर दिया, उस दिन अपने आप अपनी औकात में आ जाएगा, भारत के सामने दंडवत प्रणाम करने आ जाएगा। और जिस तरह से मोदी जी एक व्यवस्था बना रहे हैं कि उसका कंपनसेशन, उसकी क्षतिपूर्ति जो अमेरिका में हम जो लोग एक्सपोर्ट कर रहे थे दूसरे देशों से हो जाएगी। और जिस दिन भारत, चीन, रसिया, मिडिल ईस्ट के और यूरोप के कुछ देश मिलकर के खड़े हो गए तो नया वर्ल्ड ऑर्डर तैयार हो जाएगा। हम अमेरिका के नाक में दम कर देंगे।
विदेशी कंपनियों ने आपको भी बहुत दबाने की कोशिश की थी, वोकल फॉर लोकल, ये कारगर कैसे होगा?
आज़ादी के इन आप यदि 79 वर्षों की बात करें तो कौन लोकल ब्रांड खड़ा हो पाए? हेयर केयर में, डेंटल केयर में, स्किन केयर में, यूनिलीवर का, नेस्ले का, ये कोका कोला, पेप्सी और तमाम तरह के जो और एफएमसीजी जितनी भी कंपनियां हैं, कोलगेट का कौन वो मुकाबला कर पाया? लोग टूथपेस्ट मैंने कोलगेट समझते थे और प्रारंभ में तो हमारे दंतकांति को भी लोग कहते थे वो बाबा जी का कोलगेट दे दो। लेकिन आज दंतकांति ने उनके नाकों चने चबा दिया। आधे से ज़्यादा भारत में हम कोलगेट से आगे हैं। तो आपको हिम्मत के साथ जब आप खड़े होते हैं तो देश ताकत भी देता है। हाँ, प्रारंभ में जरूर उपेक्षा भी होती है, विरोध भी होता है, लेकिन उसके बाद आप अपने यदि सत्य पर कायम है तो सत्य में जयते यतो धर्मस ततो जय होता ही है मेरे भाई सावंत जी।
तो मतलब जहां पर सत्य है वहां पर जय है, सुप्रीम कोर्ट का भी आदर्श वाक्य है। तो भारत सत्य के साथ है, आपको लग रहा है?
भारत,
कितना समय हमको इसमें लगेगा?
इसमें कुछ नहीं, थोड़ा भारत के लोगों को एकजुट होकर के सब प्रकार के गिलानी कुंठाओं से बाहर आकर के अपने अतीत के गौरव को, अपने गौरव आपका भी नाम है, अतीत के गौरव, वर्तमान की चुनौती और भविष्य के सपनों को अपने आंखों में संजो करके हमें आगे बढ़ना पड़ेगा। और एक एक व्यक्ति में जो अपरिमित सामर्थ्य है, हमारे यहाँ कहा जाता है ना, पिंड में ब्रह्मांड है, मुझ में ही राम है, कृष्ण हनुमान है, मुझ में ही गणेश है, मुझे श्री गणेश करना है और मुझे इस कार्य को अपने परिणाम तक पहुंचाना है। तो हम जब ऐसी प्रतिबद्धता के साथ आगे बढ़ेंगे तो निश्चित रूप से देश को कोई रोक नहीं सकता। भारत में आज भी अप्रतिम सामर्थ्य, छोटे छोटे देश, इजराइल जैसा देश जिसकी 1 करोड़ भी आबादी नहीं है, वो पूरी दुनिया में ठसक के साथ खड़ा हुआ है। तो भारत अपनी धमक के साथ कैसे क्यों नहीं खड़ा हो सकता?
तो हर भारतवासी को जो इस समय इंडिया टुडे को देख रहा है, इंडिया फर्स्ट पर आप क्या कहना चाहेंगे?
स्वदेशी का पूर्ण आग्रह रखना होगा। स्वदेशी शिक्षा, स्वदेशी चिकित्सा, स्वदेशी अर्थव्यवस्था, स्वदेश का, स्वधर्म का, राष्ट्र धर्म का गौरव अपने हृदय में रखना होगा और बायकॉट करना पड़ेगा सिंथेटिक मेडिसिन का, सिंथेटिक जितने भी प्रोडक्ट्स हैं, खास करके अमेरिका की कंपनियों का और अमेरिका के प्रोडक्ट्स का तो आज से ही बहिष्कार करो, आज से श्री गणेश करो गणेश चतुर्थी पर ही। फिर देखो अपने आप औकात में आएगा, ट्रम्प और ट्रम्प का बाप भी आएगा।
बाबा रामदेव, आप मेरे साथ जुड़े, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। तो द मैसेज इज वेरी क्लियर, स्वदेशी इज द वे फॉरवर्ड। गौरव सावंत in Delhi for India Today. So on Ganesh Chaturthi, it's a very auspicious day. Make that beginning that you will buy what is made in India, and especially in the upcoming festival season, because that will become extremely important. So amidst this devastating floods triggered by relentless rains in Jammu and Kashmir, Himachal Pradesh and parts of Punjab, the Indian Air Force has swiftly launched relief and rescue operations. 5 Mi-17 or Mi-17 transport helicopters and one Chinook heavy lift transport helicopter have been pressed into service from nearby bases in the northern sector. Their aim is to ensure maximum rescue operations and relief as quickly as possible. So a C-130J tactical lift transport aircraft of the Indian Air Force loaded with relief supplies and rescue material along with an NDRF team has also been dispatched to Jammu to provide critical relief and supplies. Trained personnel are being rushed to the impacted areas and the worst impacted areas to escalate rescue operations. There are additional transport aircraft that remain on standby to join the relief and rescue operations because the situation is bad, sadly may get worse. 34 people have sadly lost their lives in the flash floods at Mata Vaishno Devi shrine after flash floods triggered a massive landslide. More than 3,500 people have been shifted to safer areas. We get you more in this report.
Cloudburst, landslides, flash floods. Nature has turned relentless tormentor in the hills of Jammu and Kashmir. For 4 straight days, the skies haven't stopped opening up. Torrential rains have pounded the region. Flash floods tear through villages. Bridges crumble like paper. Electric poles snap. Towers topple. Several bridges have also collapsed. One crucial collapse in Jammu city where cars were caught in the rubble. In Katra, disaster struck. Rain-triggered landslide hit along the Mata Vaishno Devi pilgrimage route. Many have lost their lives and several are yet to be rescued. Prime Minister Narendra Modi condoled the large-scale loss of lives. Flights and trains have been halted or cancelled after heavy deluge. While rescue operations are underway, millions remain cut off. The water level in the Chenab is flowing above the danger mark. The swollen river threatening habitations and banks of Tavi River.
People who are stuck in floodwaters are being rescued. Indian Army, Jammu and Kashmir Police, NDRF, SDRF, CRPF and other agencies are working in close coordination, and no stone is being left unturned when it comes to providing relief to the people. But situation is alarming. It continues to rain cats and dogs here in Jammu region.
Jammu and Udhampur have recorded their worst rainfall ever in 24 hours. People living in low-lying areas have been asked to stay extra vigilant and avoid going near water bodies. Deadly floods and landslides in monsoon season are becoming more frequent. The UN has called rising floods and droughts a distress signal of climate breakdown. While the climate experts warn that global warming, combined with reckless construction and destruction of natural defenses, is creating a deadly cocktail. The bigger question is, are we engineering our own disaster? Bureau Report, India Today.
The situation does remain extremely grim and we are tracking that story very closely. That is all I have for you on India First this evening. Many thanks for watching.